wasting any time, we're going to the next session. Next session is on scaling technology innovations. And on this panel, we have Ameeta Roy from Red Hat. She's she heads the solution architect team for India and South Asia. So she's one of she engages with clients and partners to bring the power of open source technologies to enterprises, to innovate and build agile businesses, optimize their IT, build modern applications. She's a role model for, I think, the women here, because a lady in technology at this level. So, yeah, thank you, Ameeta, for being here. Then we have Swati Vasudevan. She's the MD of Khan Academy. She has, so other than Khan Academy that we all know of, Swati has also served as the COO of Gates Foundation India and co-established the Indian School of Public Policy as a founding CEO. Thank you, Swati. Then we have Avnish Sabharwal joining us as the next panelist. He's the MD of Accenture Ventures and Open Innovation. He is responsible for designing and leading the innovation agenda for Accenture. His work includes partnering with startups, investing and acknowledging and acquiring technology. Hi, Avnish. Then do we finally have Professor Satyanarayana? Sir, welcome. We were waiting for you. He's director of IIT Tirupati. Thank you, sir. And lastly, we have a moderator, Chetan Bhagat. So he needs no introduction. All of us have read 5 Point Someone, I think. Over to you, Chetan.
Hi everyone. Hi to the esteemed panel. We have इतने बड़े-बड़े महारथी हैं यहाँ पे. Such esteemed people, and we were discussing. We got a chance to hang out at the coffee shop, and we were discussing this session in detail. And we were saying that today, when you talk of innovation, we first thought that session is called scaling innovation, and nowadays innovation is technology only. Tech only, और कुछ innovation बचा ही नहीं है, right? You cannot, like, if you open a gym, it's not a startup. There has to be code. Code मांगता है, and but then I thought, let's for me, like, at least in a way, in my work also, there is the innovation part or the writing part of writing a book, and then you want as many people to read it, make it bestseller, whatever. That's the scaling part. Same for any tech. It's like there is a core product or service, and then you want to scale it. So first, we will get into how to scale things. But I was asking the panel this, that are we too obsessed with scale? You know, and does scale take away something? Like when you're making a product, when you're doing creativity, when you're doing innovation, like at least if I write a book constantly thinking about what will sell the most, it won't be the best book. Even now, the book that was mentioned was 5 Point Someone, which was my first book. When I wasn't famous, it was actually written in a way that I had no idea, right? And same way, sometimes companies are asked to scale very fast for whatever reason, and they lose the correct product, the touch with the customer, something. So is there too much of are these two separate things, and is scale too much? And then later on we can ask how to scale anyway, because of course we must all scale, because it's not a startup if it's not tech, and it's not successful if it doesn't scale. So ma'am, we'll start from you. Everybody, opening thoughts.
Thanks, Chetan. Since I am from Red Hat, I will wear my tech hat to talk about, scaling. What would scaling mean from a technology innovation standpoint, right? The way I would like to think about it is, I'm sure you'll all agree that great business ideas is what drives innovation, right? And if one wants to innovate, you need to be able to innovate at speed. You can take all your time on R&D, but you need to be able to innovate at speed, the speed at which the market requires that particular whatever innovation. You need to be agile to be able to change things depending on market response, and you need to also be flexible, right? So from that point of view, and why I think scaling technology innovation is important is because when you want your idea to reach a large population, and in a country like India, there are several of these ideas, that have really, I think in a previous panel, I heard about Digi Yatra. Then we've all seen Arogya Setu app, during COVID, the kind of scale it was able to reach. Then we're talking about, our stock exchanges. We're talking about UPI transactions that reached, some billion, I forget exactly how many billions of transactions. All those are scale. And how do you reach scale? So one of the ways that I would like to think about it is that we have to be able to create quickly and be able to fail fast, So rapid prototyping, testing, and in order to do that, many times, open source becomes a low entry barrier because, you don't have to necessarily only learn from your own experiences and fail at them, right? There is a lot of innovation that happens in open source communities that can be leveraged because a lot of the communities pivot around all the areas where the technology innovation is happening. I'm sorry, I keep bringing back to technology because that's the space, I operate in. But there's a lot of that innovation happening that can be leveraged, okay, to get a starting point. And then, with enterprises, if you're going to look at a startup lens, then from an enterprise standpoint, it's a symbiotic relationship that we would have, because some niche idea that a startup may come up may complement, something that a larger company may already be going to market with a solution that this could add value to, So joint GTM strategies together can help you achieve that scale, So that's the way I would like to look at it as my opening thoughts. And over to Swati.
Chetan, too, and I think you ask a very good question. And the way I look at it, it really depends on what you're trying to solve for. I think in my sector, so we as Khan Academy, here's what we do in India, just to give you, to set some context here for what I'm about to say. The Khan Academy in India is focused on providing access to world-class quality education to the underserved population of students in the country, which is the government schools, and do it in partnership with the government at scale. Now, why is that important in this particular use case and this particular sector? The idea is to try and bring impact at scale, right? You want to bring access to quality education at scale. And why is that important? Just to put some numbers here. There are 260 million students in the country, of which 157 million attend government schools. So a very large section are underserved today. And and they don't have access to quality education. I think we can all agree on that, in the similar way as a privileged student or in the remaining part of this 260 million would. So if you want to bring that access to quality education, you want to do it fast. Why do you want to do it fast? Because you don't want this generation to pass you by. So if you want to make an impact at a scale large enough to impact that large set of population, you have to design something for scale. And that's why scale is important in our case, where you're trying to work on a public good, trying to improve lives and make an impact at the scale, which will have an impact on population level metrics, such as GDP in this case. So I think that's where the scalability is very important. And one of the reasons I joined Khan Academy was actually that. I wanted to make a difference to the country at that scale in my lifetime. Now, that's only possible if you design something which can be scaled. There are, just to give you the contrary side, there are enough organizations that are doing some really phenomenal work in the country in the education side. But the work is happening in small pockets across India. Doesn't mean that they're not adding value. They're adding a lot of value. They're setting up some really interesting models. They're showcasing, they're doing pilots and doing proof of concepts, which are providing ideas for design of other scalable products. But it's not having a dent on the population level metric, right? Another quick example, 2017 in Punjab scored the bottommost quartile in maths education amongst all the states in the National Achievement Survey, which is a survey conducted by the central government where it rank order different states. 2019 Khan Academy goes in, and by 2020-21, we were at scale. In other words, all the 6,700 schools in Punjab were using Khan Academy to supplement math in Punjabi. Come to 2021, and the next National Achievement Survey happens. Punjab topped all the states in maths. Now, I'm not saying Khan Academy was the only reason for it. There were other things that were being tried, but as we all know, in order to affect that population level metric, which is state level metric, and to show up in that number, you have to have the intervention at scale. A really strong, solid intervention, but done in a pilot subscale setting, will not impact population level metric. Hopefully that gives a little bit of a context on why in some cases, scale is very important.
Thanks, Chetan. I think first of all, I agree with both my panelists here in terms of the examples they have given as far as India is concerned, right? India is all about scale. So I think that goes without saying that if you want to make an impact in India, whether as a corporate or a startup, you need scale. I'll just give an example of some things which did not reach scale. There was a product which was developed some time back with IISc, if I'm not wrong, was called Simputer. Some of you might have heard of that. Probably a better product and an earlier product than the iPhone. Both in terms of technology, but more in terms of also design, right? It didn't go anywhere. Had it gone and scaled, I think today we would be having Simputers in our, in our courts rather than the iPhone. So it's a great example of a product, innovative technology did not scale from India. The second I would like to call is Reva, right? Again, one of the earlier pioneering projects in terms of electric vehicle. Today we talk about Tesla, we talk about the Chinese EV market. But had the infrastructure and government policy been supportive, which would have, led Reva to scale, again, the landscape would have been very different. These are just two examples, but having said that, there is definitely a scope for niche innovation as well. I work with startups which are either in deep tech or deep science space, and they are trying to solve some very tough problems for both business and society. And they take a very, very long time to scale, and that's why they need patient capital and the entire support of the ecosystem. Israel ecosystem was built like that as well. Hardly any startup coming from Israel scales because they get bought up very, very quickly, right? Those startups get bought and then get integrated into the value chain of big industries and big companies. So I think there is opportunity, Chetan, for both. It depends upon the context is my view.
Sir, scaling we should do. Scale the IITs.
Yeah. So thank you. So I was just telling them that I didn't know I was part of this panel today morning. So I was just putting my thoughts together as I came here, walked in here. So I'll look at the scaling from the perspective of education. Okay. As you said, we have currently the gross enrollment ratio around between 28-30%, and we're talking about reaching 30% by 2035, and so on. So you're talking about huge numbers. How do we scale up our education system in a very fast way, which will lead to the innovation ecosystem and so on? And this is the challenge that we have. in our country in getting access to the large population for so on. So this is one thing that you know I think the Indian institutions typically are suboptimal in terms of their size. You look at the average size of a typical educational institution in India, I'm talking about higher education, is less than 3,000. Okay, is less than 3,000. You go look at the universities in US, in Canada, in Europe, they all have, you know, a medium-sized university will be 30,000 students. Large universities have 50 to 70,000 students. And even small, even these niche universities, whether it's MIT, Harvard, they're all 10 to 15,000 students kind of size. Now, one of the things with respect to innovation is that you want to bring in people with diverse background, diverse outlook together. And so one of the aspects regarding this is dealt with quite well in the NEP, is that we need to create more institutions that are broad-based rather than very niche, separate schools of planning and architecture, separate law schools, separate pharmacy schools, and separate medical schools, and so on. Instead of that, we need campuses with multiple departments. So I give this example in terms of optimal utilization of resources also. I take the example of my alma mater, IIT Madras, where I studied and then I was also a faculty member. So when I studied, we were about 2,200, 2,300 students in the campus, and we had certain infrastructure, you know, in terms of sports fields, common thing, classrooms, and so on. Today there are 12,000 students. So when I had 12,000 students, doesn't mean that from 2,500 to 12,000 you're scaled up about nearly 5 times. It doesn't mean I'm going to create 5 times the infrastructure. I'm not going to create 5 more football fields, 5 more auditoriums, 5 more so on. So your utilization of your resources becomes much more effective when you have a larger number of students. And the other thing is bringing in this very interdisciplinary approach. So having institutions that are of a larger scale, I think is desirable rather than opening up too many institutions in a very niche areas and at suboptimal sizes. So that is one aspect I thought I would bring out here in terms of why we need institutions of a much larger scale. I'm not talking about the university system where you have one university which is handling some 150 colleges, more from an affiliation point of view and so on. I'm talking about campuses that are at a much larger scale. The second thing that, again from a scale perspective, what I have seen is as a new IIT in the last 4-5 years, we have bought something like 170, 180 crores worth of equipment, okay? And 80% of the equipment I have to import, okay? Even simple instruments, everything has to be imported. Now we are talking about, Atmanirbhar Bharat, making a lot of these things in India and this thing. But once again, for that to be sustainable, you need scale. I think if we are going to be pushing this within the Indian ecosystem, and the people who are making it, if they're looking at supplying this, especially in this for research and for testing and for innovation, if you're looking just the Indian market, it will not be sustainable. You need to look at whoever is doing this, has to look at a scale that is internationally competitive, and you'll have to look at the international. Otherwise, there's no way you're going to be able to match at suboptimal levels of production in terms of the economy of scale that the Chinese have and so on. So I think what we need to look at is, so that's why I said I'm looking at a totally different aspect from the education, is when we have these initiatives that we need to push things that are looking at global markets rather than just addressing only the Indian market. So these are 2 points I thought I'll submit to take the discussion forward. Thank you.
Okay. So clearly everybody likes scale. So I'm going to not debate that anymore. Many of the people in the audience here have much smaller companies. You're talking of Khan Academy, you're talking of Red Hat, you're talking of IITs. These are big brands, big companies. Even the examples you gave of Reva and all, backed by big companies. If I have a startup or a startup that's been around for years, now I'm hearing messages that you must scale, think big. How do I know that I should make the back end a bit better, or make the UI a bit better, or I don't know, just make my product or service a bit better, or just have the organizational culture a bit better. I don't know, whatever. Or should the focus be on scaling? Let's just go. And scaling is usually expensive for some of the smaller startups. How do you navigate that? Yes, scaling, we want to get there. How does a founder, CEO, whatever, decide that it's time to switch? You said you must scale fast, you must innovate fast. What does that mean?
Okay. The way I would look at it is, I get your point. You know, when we're talking about the smaller companies, right? How can you leapfrog? You know, if you want to leapfrog, then you may need to piggyback. You know, so it starts with, like, how do you scale? From a technology standpoint, scale can be achieved if you're not having, you know, from a technology standpoint, what we call closed architectures. You know, you should have open architectures. You base whatever it is that you're innovating with on open standards, open processes. From an organization standpoint, you need open cultures, you know, to be able to, you know, kind of foster that kind of innovation that you want to get at, right? And today, no company lives in isolation. And therefore, small or big, you know, for example, just to give an example, you know, we had recently a lot of some banks that were, mandated by RBI to run a pilot for CBDC, central bank digital currency, right? Now, there are small players in the market that are actually developing those apps for CBDC. However, you know, they can work with companies that are already established in the banking space in terms of the ones that are providing that foundation and the platform, etc., on which many of the other banking apps are, working on. And then it becomes a win-win situation, right? So there is a huge ecosystem that you have to play with, is the point I'm trying to make, you know? So if you have made sure that the foundation of everything you're innovating on is based on open standards, so from a technology standpoint, scalability becomes easy. Because today, some technology is the next new shiny object. Tomorrow, it's going to be something else. You know, are you going to keep on changing your architecture every time? You can't, you know. So the way it'll happen, and the whole industry is pivoting around this. We're talking about open banking today. We're talking about open APIs, you know, application programming interfaces, you know, so that you can just keep on building that ecosystem as you go wrong, and that will only happen if you're based it on open, practices. So that's the way. And I would think that you would look at my solution, you know, complements, you know, which other solution, and you work with those players. For example, you know, we work with several such smaller companies that are now available on a digital marketplace that Red Hat has. You know, so when our customers are looking for solutions, obviously Red Hat cannot be in every single space, but they go to our cloud marketplace and they look at, you know, which are those solutions that are certified to work with Red Hat. So this Red Hat certification acts as a, what shall I say, a stamp of approval, if I can say that word, you know. So for our customers, it gives them that kind of confidence that yes, this is guaranteed to work on, you know, this particular platform. So that's one of the ways that one could do it. And it's not just with Red Hat, right? You could do the same with Amazon, with Google. All these companies have their marketplaces. So you could make sure that you're listed out there, you know, small or big, right? Sometimes you offer a very niche solution that is required. You know, you may be a small player, but you can achieve that scale when you are able to join hands with others in that ecosystem to make it work. That's my 2 cents on it.
It's a great question. As a creator, if you want to go to scale at some point, should you worry about that in your process? And at which point do you start worrying about that, if that's the question?
Yes.
I mean, ideally, you want to have scale in mind right at the outset. You know, you need all the way during the design phase itself. And you need to carry it as a common thread all the way through its value chain, including when you are, or in the process of your development process, including when you are figuring out your scaling strategies or go-to-market or, so have you. But that does not uniformly apply strictly in every scenario. Let me take the example that you gave, Chetan, earlier about writing a book, right? So when you're writing a book or creating a piece of art, I would go out on a limb and actually say this, that you can actually get away with not having to worry too much about scale. Why? Because in some of those instances, sometimes a consumer cannot identify what is good until they see one. So you could, as an author, get away with just focusing on creating the best piece of content, that piece of writing or that piece of art that you're trying to create. And chances are it will appeal to certain audiences. And you will get lucky if your sensibilities tend to match with a large part of the segment out there, in which automatically means it will automatically scale. So it depends on, how much of your sensibilities overlap with how large a segment out there. So I think that's the case in this example. Now let me take a different example. In the education space, or in any space where you're trying to create a product, it is imperative that you design for scale. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying it is easier to design for scale, even if it's imperfect, and improve it over time, than to build a perfect product which is meant for subscale or a pilot implementation only, and then try to take it to scale later. I'm just sharing my perspective that you may or may not agree with this, but my experience has shown that seems to be the case. So one needs to think about this at the design stage, because that's when the user needs to be your North Star, because you need to be crystal clear in what you're trying to solve for. As an example, in this case, if you're building for K through 12 education space, which is kindergarten to 12th grade, then that student is your North Star. And you need to keep that in mind. And you need to be very clear about, yes, personalization and adaptive learning are great to have, but what am I really solving for? In this case, you're solving for access. So if access is what you're solving for, automatically that helps you define your attributes in your design of the product. For example, it has to be inclusive by nature. It has to be responsibly and ethically produced, right? It has to be safe and has to take into account privacy of data for the student, because they're a minor. So just things like that. So you have to think of those things right up front. Now come to the second piece, which is the distribution or go-to-market or scalability, right? Can be known by different terms. There also, it is very important to be innovative in your thinking of how you're going to take it to scale, and the scalability matters or innovation matters in your scalability as well. As an example, even the student is my ultimate user. Trying to do targeting of students in the underserved segment or bottom of the pyramid segment is very, very challenging and very capital intensive. So Khan Academy strategically took a call that we're going to be teacher-directed platform. But even to go through teachers, it is a lot more efficient and scalable to do an aggregator approach. In this case, the state governments. So you'll gain a lot more by working through the state governments and using their machinery and building their capacity to help scale your product than trying to go it alone. Because that not only makes it more efficiently scalable, but it also helps to make it sustainable, sustain the gains, so as to say. So, long answer to your short question. It has to be right from the beginning, and then it has to thread through all the way till the end.
So I think, first of all, just a remark on the Reva, Chetan, right? We have a saying that either grow or go. So Reva did not scale, and that's why they were acquired. If they had scaled, maybe they should not have got acquired, and they would have become a big Tesla on its own right. So I think that's a fact of life. If you remain small, you will either go bust or you will get acquired. That's the only two ways to do about it. Now, and I'm talking about obviously the tech industry and similar industries. Now, if you look at, when do startups come to know that they have to scale? If you ask the startups, they are in a big hurry to scale because they also have VC money. right? And VCs don't have any patience. I think most of you know that. So if the startups are also not showing growth, then it is a tough time for them because VCs are breathing on their neck. And that is why growth of deep tech startups, I think in the last session there was a question going on, why doesn't Google come out of India? Or why doesn't a big product company come out of India? That's the reason. Because we don't have patient capital, right? VCs want money as soon as possible. And the startups have to oblige. And that's the reason why they also are looking for scaling very quickly without having probably built the right infrastructure in place. So scaling can be of many kinds, right? It can be of your customers, it can be geographies, can be talent, can be your operations, and it can be your tech infrastructure. All of it is included in scaling. So generally, my view is that I think the startups, the first stage before scaling, which is product market fit and growth. By the way, there is a difference between growth and scaling, right? Growth happens when your revenue is increasing, but your cost is also increasing. Scaling happens when your revenues are increasing multiple folds and the cost is not increasing as per that proportion, right? So to go to that scale or to that level, you need a product market fit and you need a lot of experimentation before you can decide that this is the right time to scale. Having said that, I'll give you a story of what happened with Airbnb. Airbnb in 2014 was a company of 40 odd people and they had just done their first millionth booking. And suddenly they got a shock of their life when they heard that 3 brothers in Cologne, Germany, had built a copycat startup. In fact, these brothers were experts of copying the US models and then scaling them, right? And they had made billions of money on that. So suddenly a startup came up in Germany and they were competing with Airbnb. They received $90 million of funding, while Airbnb at that time had received 7 million. This startup offered to buy Airbnb and said, you can buy us, it was the other way around. They said, you can buy us, but we would need 25% of Airbnb, right? That was the offer. Obviously, the Airbnb people refused that. What Airbnb did was that they sent people to Germany and Europe because they knew that they had to actually scale in Europe if they had to become a global thing. They sent people to Europe, they hired people, they brought them back into US, trained them, and then sent them back to hire hundreds of people. Suddenly in 1 year, the game changed and Airbnb was able to take the entire market. What happened was later coined as a term called blitzscaling. Blitzscaling, right? And this came from the LinkedIn founder, Reef Hodman. So what happened was that during the pandemic also, this became very, very popular. VCs basically came up with this idea that if you are not the category leader, you are gone, right? Which means that you have to pick up more and more money and go to scale very, very fast because there is no scope for the second leader. Now that concept is receiving a lot of criticism. But I just gave you an example that while all the fundamentals of scaling should be there, but in case of what Airbnb did, is a unique example of blitzscaling, where if they had not done that, they would have probably got acquired by the other company.
Sir, before I come to you, this blitzscaling can work and it can very badly backfire also. We had in India a very big education startup who were blitzscaling, sponsoring cricket, World Cup football, and we all know what happened there. And there also, I feel the product was not there for that blitzscaling and it just went wrong. Airbnb, it worked out for them, maybe their product was right. Even on Reva, I don't know, you feel it's a scaling issue, but Reva, the product itself, the car, I mean, it's a little mean, but the BBC, or they have an auto show and they do auto car reviews, and they did a race of Reva with 4 guys holding a table and running, and the 4 guys won. When you have that kind of, then it's kind of, what scaling can you do then, right?
Chetan?
Sometimes that can be an issue also, but yeah, sir, your thoughts?
I'm just sorry I'm interrupting. I have to keep the time in mind and a lot of...
This timer is all over the place.
I know, I'm
I
sorry.
know. How much time do we have?
maybe at 5-10 minutes, but a lot of people in the audience have questions.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
just want
after
to-
sir's thing, we'll
Yeah.
take. Because this is telling me 18 minutes and 53, 52, 51.
I don't know. People are
Yeah.
telling me
So,
different
sir,
numbers.
your
Okay.
thoughts and then we'll break the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I'll just quickly. So this issue of scaling one, again, looking from my lens of educational sector, certainly there's a huge demand for computer science programs, right? There are private engineering colleges suddenly scaled up from having 3-4 sections to going to 25 sections, 30 sections of computer science and engineering. So you overnight, within 3-4 years, you have scaled up massively, trying to address the local the demand. But the challenge is, when you're doing the scaling, do we have the wherewithal in terms of the faculty members who can handle this kind of numbers? There are many private engineering colleges today, they tell that mechanical engineering, computer science, civil engineering and other faculty members saying, go learn Python, go learn blockchain and start teaching those courses. Now, the other challenge is what's going to happen to all this huge. So this whole scaling thing has to be done very carefully. Just catering to the immediate market requirements is a challenge. And at the same time, what is happening is the core sector departments are getting shut down, right? So this sudden overnight increase, this thing is going to have a huge impact. That tomorrow when there's a demand for more of these core sector, we say we still have to build 60% of our infrastructure. We want to be a manufacturing hub for the world. And if no student is joining mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, you start shutting down these programs and scaling up only one core area, one area, as they call it, the tech area, it's going to be a big challenge. So I think we need to do this carefully, but at the same time, there is a requirement, the use of technology to reach these large masses. The model, for example, that IIT Madras data science program, where they've started admitting 10,000 students, giving access to the IIT education to a larger mass, because we have this holy cow of JEE, advanced JEE, that only way you can get into an IIT. But now we are looking at newer models of how do we reach to a larger number of students using technology. So I think we need to look at this from various angles, which can be easily scaled up, if required, scaled down. And there are certain niche areas which, from a country's critical economy point of view, critical technology capability point of view, cannot let them die, right? So these things have to be sustained. In the interest of just building up large scales, we cannot let these things die. So these things have to be dealt with different ways, depending on the market demand, depending on interests of the country and so on.
Nice. Okay, I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Please introduce yourself, your name and what you do, your organization. That'll make it more interesting. So how do we do it? Ma'am, you only choose. You choose.
The closest.
Yeah.
Thanks, Aditi. Thanks for all of you. My name is Arks, and I'm from IIT Kanpur. I run a Section 8 company there. But I have an observation that probably everyone is missing, maybe missing. I just want your idea. I think Ameeta said about how scaling has happened in technology, where it's Arogya Setu, Aadhaar, UPI. Swati, you talked about Khan Academy. Punjab, you specifically spoke about 6,700 schools you scaled up and made it number 1 in math. Or Satyanarayana sir has talked about engineering colleges going up from something like 600 to 4,000 in very, very quick time. And of course, computer science going up. And Dr. Vipin talking about Reva and Simputer not scaling up. If you look at one close thread everywhere, all the others, Arogya Setu, UPI, Aadhaar, engineering colleges, it's the government which is spending or rather helping that entire thing grow. Why only Punjab? Because Punjab government helped Khan Academy to grow. Khan Academy has been there for a very long time. But why only Punjab and it has become number 1? Why not the other 27 states? But when you look at things like...
you have a question?
I'm just asking, whereas Google, FB, TikTok, etc. have grown without government intervention, what is it that we are missing here in India, which is when scaling technologies we talk about, and is it only government intervention which can help, or something else can do it also? That's my question.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, at least for public good type of sectors, which is public health, education. You cannot do it without the government. I mean, the government has the largest outlay of any development funds in the country for both of these sectors and many more. So in some ways, you would be a little naive trying to go it alone, trying to create a parallel structure when a government structure already exists and at that scale. So I think it only makes sense to partner with the government to make this work. I'm not saying that it's not possible to do it in parallel. You can do it in parallel, it's just a lot harder. The reason why it works with the government and harder otherwise, at least for these spaces, is because the country is not a homogeneous country. We are a very diverse country, and a lot of the subjects are state subjects. Education is a state subject, as an example, right there. So you have to work state by state by state by state. It's very hard to scale if you're working as a private sector entity, trying to figure out those customized solutions for each state on your own. And you need a distribution channel. You need an aggregator. And the government ends up being a very strong aggregation point and a distribution pipe for you to put your products and your services through. Plus, I think it's valuable for the country to do it that way. It helps to build their capacity, right? Then, because 10 years later, your organization, Google, may not be there in the country, or that product may not be there, or these people who are trying to help get that product out in the market may not be there to do the hand-holding and the capacity building. So then who's going to take it forward? Will the whole thing die down? That's not what you want to have happen. So working with the government also helps with the second aspect of just building something which is for sustainability also, not just for scale. So I think it's important to remember that scale and sustainability need to go in hand. You don't want to do all this work which is at scale and let it all die within 5 years of you starting out. So, but anybody else?
Actually, we don't have time, ma'am. I would have loved to get everyone's views, but you can see the timer right here now. It's like a ISRO timer. Ma'am, yes. Just take the mic and introduce yourself. And
my name is Rekha Pai Kamath, and I want to go back to your first question.
What do you do? Which organization?
I'm representing Capria. It's a VC for the Global South, but I actually live in the US. I wanted to go back to your original question, which was why do we need scale? And I'm actually from the field of technology, but I lived here in the last few months, and I saw how not being clear on the objectives of why we need scale has actually messed up our impact. So a good example I'm giving you, digitization of things like laundries. I grew up in a place where laundries were quite common, and ghar chalta tha, kisi ka ghar chalta tha. And now we have VC money that's subsidizing laundromat type of places that are disintermediating people in the middle, small and mom and pop services. So for me, shareholder interests, VC interests, even employees' interests, companies are all maximized by scale, which is great. Technology has good impact, which is great. But when we have stakeholders' interests not fully taken care of, where monopolistic practices are being increased, like you only have 1 or 2 players now for taxis, mobility, or maybe 3 if you count Blue Smart. I'm looking at Bangalore. But my point is,
I understood your question.
Yeah.
So since paucity of time, who wants to answer? Sir, would you like to answer? Can scale become evil?
Yeah, I think it's definitely true. In the kind of example she is giving, I think it all depends upon the kind of model you have and the problem which you are trying to solve. If you are trying to create a problem where obviously none exists and then trying to scale it, then I think probably that's not the best model to go with. Having said that, I think you can always have these outlier examples. It's not that these examples are not true, and I think that's why Chetan, the question was very valid, right? Does everything have to scale? Probably not. But where we are sitting in terms of technology and where we are sitting from a country perspective, if you're looking at India, I think if you have to make an impact, then yes, scale is important, but you have to put some common sense behind it as well, I guess.
No, as we discussed, I feel everything doesn't have to. Trust can't scale, love can't scale. I mean, it's a deep question. Think about it later on. But that's me. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming, and thank you to the panel for such amazing insights. I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad to be part of the conference, to be part of PAN IIT. Thank you.